Welcome to A Novel Talk. I'm Wendy Kendall, cozy mystery author, published by the Wild Rose Press. You can find my books on Amazon, Barnes& Noble, and other online retailers. And find out more about my writing and me on my website, wendywritesbooks.com. My books about the characters living in the small town of Bayside started with Cat Out of the Bag. Cat is Catherine Watson, purse designer and amateur sleuth. From designer bags to body bags, when the mayor is found murdered at Catherine's gala grand opening party. I had so much fun with that mystery, I immediately wrote the prequel, Pistachio Makes a Splash. Finalist for Best Suspense at Killer Nashville is my book, Snow Kiss Cookies to Die For. And if you're looking to get away from winter with a warm weather read, Cherry Shakes in the Park is a blended swirl of romance and mystery. My most recent book is a romance, which has a plot that transcends the holiday season, titled Heart of Christmas Cookies and Dreams. I'm busy finishing my sixth book, Another Mystery. Thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much you enjoy my books. After the podcast, you're welcome to check out my website, wendywritesbooks.com. And here is your co-host.
Yeah, Wendy, I can't wait for that book to come out. You're one of the few mystery readers that I read. My name
Oh,
is my
nice.
name is Carl Lee, and I write paranormal fantasy. My current project is Brenda McCoy, Witch Detective, where Brenda assists the Seattle Police Department in solving crimes of a rather supernatural nature.
Can't wait for that one. But in the meantime, our guest is USA Today best-selling author Sofia Aves. She lives near Brisbane, Australia, and writes fast-paced police romances, sizzling military units, steamy cowboys with a Montana backdrop, and the occasional cheeky god. She's marketing manager for Romance Cafe. She writes Kid Lit for charity and has over 80 publications across three not so super secret pen names. Welcome, amazing Aussie author Sofia Aves to A Novel Talk.
Hi, Wendy. Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. Uh, I had the great opportunity of reading your story, Pacific Persuasion. It was very intriguing, um, uh, kind of a romance mystery, a lot like what Wendy writes sometimes. But in
Yeah.
Pacific Persuasion, um, Pearl starts the book. She is a very focused individual, dedicated to her career. She's not there. She's not there on. She's on a cruise, but she's not there for a pleasure cruise. Uh, she's she's there to liaise with the local authorities, Kai, um, and
Mhm.
she maintains her attention on the job. Can you tell us more about what drives Pearl?
Pearl is career focused to the point that she's literally made herself a bit of an island, and she doesn't really bother too much with family or friendship. She just wants to get the job done, and that's really her driving force. And she wants most of all to go back home to America. While she enjoys the idea, the concept, and the idea of being on the cruise ship and getting the job done, seeing as they lost another agent there, she just really wants to get it done and go back home. That's really her driving force. So the faster she gets it done, the faster she can go back to America.
Faster this case is solved, the next case is ready. I like it. Um, Pearl and
Absolutely.
Kai, however, do in fact fall into a quick shipboard romance. Um, what do you think grants people the freedom to couple on these cruises? Because you hear about it a lot.
You do. People put on different masks when they go on a cruise. I don't know if you guys have ever been on before, but I've been on two. One out to Fiji was what I modelled this particular cruise. and one out to Europe, both traveling with my mother at the time. So I didn't exactly get a lot of that freedom. We sort of babysat each other throughout the process. But I found that people will tell stories about themselves. They will be who they want other people to see them as. And for a lot of people who are very much introverts, they can become extroverts on those cruises and really bust out, because it's that sort of dance like nobody's watching sort of theory. So they really do cut loose. I think Pearl gets that opportunity with Kai because he's just right there in front of her, and she can't take it any further because she's going home soon.
Yeah. My only experience with cruising was with the military, and I got to tell you, that provided a great deal of recreating yourself as well, I have to say. Pearl and Kai are both investigating the ship. How did their relationship aid or harm their efforts in solving this case?
Oh, the ship and the sex is absolutely a massive distraction to both of them, to the point they both fall apart over it. The investigation starts to fall apart. Neither of them are concentrating, and all goes turtle up. So, yeah, it absolutely gets in the road of what they're doing. But I think they discover something else about themselves and each other in the process, which is why their romance works, because they were both so career focused that they needed to have that extra sort of humanitarian aspect away from their own personal damage that needed to come out as well.
Nice. I have a technical question. I'm not a romance person. I'm not a romance writer.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain the difference between writing a sweet romance versus a steamy romance versus erotica?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to. Usually there's a 5-numbered scale that we use at Romance Cafe Publishing. Harlequin use it. It's generally speaking, 1 is very, very clean. 5 is extremely steamy. So there's quite a bit of differentiation between it. So 1 would be considered clean, which is no sex before marriage, often Christian or inspirational, but doesn't have to be. No real contact between the people, maybe a chaste kiss on the cheek or a holding hands or a hug. That's really as far as it goes. Sweet is usually number 2, which is where you may have up to closed door sex. There might be a little bit of cussing, a little bit of damn sort of in there, something like that. Maybe some made up cuss words. And you can get a good kiss in with that sort of stuff. And it can be up to closed door sex, which is where we sort of all fade to black, where they walk into the bedroom and then the door gets literally kicked shut or something along those lines, or it fades to black. So you don't actually see what's going on, but it's more implied. Number 3 and 4 are more sort of in the range of open door sex to explicit sex. I write at a level 4 regularly, is probably where I am at. All the cuss words. I don't know what I can say, but any P's, C's, F's, let's, just run through your head what you can use there. It's very explicit. The acts are drawn out. You get to really be in the bedroom with them, which, I mean, look, honestly, if we're going to put the characters through all that stress and all that angst, I need the payoff at the end. It's got to be there. So, honestly, their reward. It's my reward. I use those sex scenes as a carrot to get me through the book. The sex scenes are the easiest ones to rip out, really. They really are. When you go up to number 5, you're walking into erotica land. There's 2 different parts of erotica. There is erotica and erotic romance. Erotica is in a realm of its own. It's not specific to romance. Erotica is defined by the individual's sexual journey. So what they are, what they're experiencing, it doesn't have to have a happily ever after, and it doesn't have a happy for now ending. And that is absolutely critical, along with that sex scene, in romance, because readers get really, really cranky if the male protagonist dies at the end. We don't want to see death at the end. We don't want to see them break up or get divorced or find somebody else. Romance has to end with a happily ever after, a happy for now ending. That's what we read that angst through to, because we know that at the end we get that payoff. It is really, really critical. Erotica doesn't have that. It can, but it doesn't have to. Erotic romance, on the other hand, while erotica is the sexual journey of the individual, erotic romance, which is what Pacific Persuasion technically is the sexual journey of the couple. It does have to have a happily ever after or a HEA or a happy for now ending. So it's still a romance in all sense of the words, but the sex scenes really dominate in the book. It is not about the amount of sex scenes, but it is about how we feel going into each of those scenes. A kiss can take several pages instead of a line or a paragraph. Erotica really goes into what's happening on a physical and mental level. So there is a huge range in romance, and romance is such a whopping category all on its own. But from a lot of years of reading, since I was 13, reading Harlequin at the local library because I ran through the kids' books pretty fast, I've learned a lot about romance in the last few years. So
Wow.
it's been a good journey.
Who knew? Well, you knew.
Mm-hmm.
So the cruise ship is a wonderful backdrop for this racy mystery. How did your choice of setting increase the tension in both the romance and the crime that Pearl and Kai were investigating?
Well, you said you were military and you did a couple of offshores, so you know you're in a very contained space. You can't get off the boat. You're all stuck together. You can't escape each other, and that goes to both the sexual partner and the guy doing the dirty, right? So you really do have that sort of captive audience. Where are people going to hide, and how are they going to hide, and how can you get away from each other when you know that you're going to turn around the next corner and that person you just want to see is going to be right there in front of you? So having that sort of captive audience really does help raise the tension. It gives an awful lot of opportunities to freak out the neighbours in your cabin as well, I think. Probably. Bit noisy.
Book one of your Blue-Blooded Brothers series is Collision. And wow, what a collision of characters, motives, and emotional forces. I enjoyed this read very much. A blend of steamy romance, action, and suspense. Mila is a sensitive, creative woman and artistic painter. She's haunted by a terrifying life and death incident that she survived 5 years ago, and haunted by the bad guy who got away. Can you tell us about her?
Miller, Collision was the very first book that I wrote, the very first romance that I wrote, and her scene in the bank, which is the first chapter of Collision, where the bank heist takes place and the bad guy gets away, was written when my son was 1. He's now 6, turning 7 this year, and it sat on my laptop for 3 months. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just knew that it was going to be a romance, and that first full chapter sat there for months and months and months, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I ended up writing the entire book during NaNoWriMo in 2019, which is National Novel Writing Month, where we try and put down 50,000 words over the period of a month. And I got the book written in that month. I was really, really proud of myself, considering I also had a broken hand at the time. Miller's story really hit me hard because I hadn't realised how much information I had in my head about PTSD. I am a DV survivor, and my husband is a veteran as well. So we live with several different variations of PTSD daily, and I had no idea how much of that had come out in the writing until one of my beta readers turned around and said to me, "You've portrayed this really well." I'm like, "Oh, well, gee, thank you. That's brilliant. I'm glad that's the job." But Miller just developed on her own, which was wonderful. It's just who she was. It was what came from that first incident, and it really started to redefine her life afterwards because her life changed so much.
Yeah, it really is. It touches your heart reading about her. It's really, it's just told so well. Your primary protagonist, Cal, is an incredible, blue-blooded and daring undercover cop, driven by his determination for justice and to win every pursuit in the name of the law. Can you tell us about him?
I spent a lot of years watching NCIS, and if anybody has watched the LA version, I'd say that that Cal's inspiration probably comes from somewhere around those actors. Police procedurals have been part of my life for so long, and it was sort of natural that I would write one. But I'd set out to write a romance, and what I ended up with was this amazing police procedural series that goes through a whole lot of bromance. These guys are a particularly tight unit, and Cal was always the head of it for me until then again Liam pops up, but that's a different book. Cal is a really well-rounded guy. He has made a lot of mistakes, and he's spent the rest of his career from his rookie years up trying to make up for those mistakes. And that's really defined who he is and the reason why he takes failure so poorly, I think, as well.
I love that you write collision in these two characters, two very distinct points of view in order to tell this story. What advantages are there in having more than one character tell the story? And also, what challenges does that present for the author?
I love being in both people's heads. It actually, I feel like it's cheating because we get to be in both people's heads. But the biggest advantage is that when he walks into the cop shop and he's in his office, I can be in his head and we can see what he's doing because Miller can't be there. She's not part of that environment. So you get to see these other facets of the character, her home life, his work life, until it goes round and round and they do collide and meet up at the other end. It's really important to be able to see in both their heads so clearly, sort of point of view that you are right there with them, you're on the street level and you're experiencing the same emotions that they're experiencing because you're so close to the action. The disadvantage, honestly, I don't find one. I've written a couple of books in third person. I am still workshopping them because they feel dry. I really like writing in first person. I find that for me, it's much easier to really get under their skin and into their heads.
Interesting. And you've created such a wonderful cast of supporting characters, especially Cal's blue-blooded brothers, who we can find out more about throughout this series. And I can't wait to read on. Can you tell us a little about maybe one in particular of this blue-blooded brothers group that you really had so much fun creating?
Liam is a very, very damaged character, and he's rather like an older brother to Cal. He helped him get out of the mess that Cal put himself in letting the bad guy go in the beginning of Collision, and he helps him work right through the rest of his life. He's ex-special ops, and he ends up as a politician upstairs working a boardroom, which he absolutely hates, and he wants to be back in the action with everyone. He was so loved that he ended up getting a novella of his own, which is Politics and Paperwork, which is now the second book in the series. There's 7 books in total. He ends up with his own book, a full book at the end. And he was so loved in that last book that I ended up reinserting him into Z Boys as well, which is the run-on series from this, set in Cairns. And people just loved the banter, loved his snark, loved his damage, loved the possessive alpha hole that he can be, the control and the lack thereof, that you see the control that he exudes on a day-to-day basis, and you see the absolute shredded parts of him on the internals as well when you're inside his head. He was very, very lightly modelled off a military man that I met many, many years ago, and he was just he was the smartest guy in the room, and he spoke so fast. He was so far ahead of everyone else that when he turned around and blah, 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 right, and you could see blank faces across the room. Nobody had a clue what he just said, but they all knew it was very intelligent. Liam was modelled lightly off that scenario, and he just sort of blew up into this fan-worthy thing. It was fantastic. So just a bit of a fluke, really.
That is so awesome. Well, your book Collision, it keeps me glued to the story with such seamless, compelling suspense. On the thriller side, I'm wondering scene by scene about what the bad guy, Wade Logan, is planning and what he'll do next. On the romance side, circumstances have thrown together a dynamic couple in Mila and Cal, yet so much can also tear them apart. I'm completely in suspense whether love really can conquer all. Can you talk a little about creating suspense in your writing?
I think it's because I have read so much suspense over the years that I can't write a romance without it. I really do struggle. And if I do write a romance without it, it's usually got some army dude or something in there. But I've got to have something, some damage guy in there. But suspense it's one of those things that seems to come naturally. I can't see the world without seeing there being an underlying plot or something else that's going to rip them apart, or some bad guy that's going to come out of the woodwork and bust everything to pieces. Like there has to be something there. But I think also from the protector realm, I need the guy to be able to do his job. If there's nothing there to protect her from, even if she doesn't always need him to do it for her, I feel like he feels that he's useless. He still has to have that function. He still has to be able to do that because that's his innate character, if that makes sense. So that sort of drives the suspense for me. It's fear is usually about the unknown or not understanding something completely. And the suspense comes from the characters not being able to see more than one step forward. So if they can't see what's going to happen next, that's where the fear starts to come in. So I've never been able to do horror. I wrote something once when I was in about year 10, and I'll never cross that line ever again. I scared the crap out of myself. And I'm just not willing to go there ever again. So suspense is where we draw the line.
Well, don't keep us in suspense, Sophia. Would you be willing to treat our listeners to a reading from one of your books?
Absolutely. Let's do an excerpt out of Collision. You guys right for me just to start reading?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay. All right. This scene comes after Miller's house has been infiltrated, and they don't know by who, but they suspect. She's already met Cal, but she just doesn't know who's ransacked her home or who to trust. Coffee rose in my throat, but I swallowed it back down, gasping. I blinked rapidly, my mind stalling as panic speared into me. Now I knew what Cal did, that he or one of his people had ransacked my home. Miller, honey, talk to me. The urgency in Cal's tone watched over me as he crouched on the floorboards. I was on the floor. When had that happened? He reached out, then drew back, looking scared. What do you need? I tried to gasp the words out, but they lodged somewhere around my heart. Finally, Cal settled for rubbing my back in long strokes. Breathe, he whispered. I nodded, inhaling through my nose, still clutching the pile of canvases with white fingers. I do pictures of his eyes, I whispered, tears filling them. It's what I see when I panic any time I close mine. At night, a therapist suggested it, drawing them, so the image would leave my head. Teddy stayed with me while I did them, and usually it worked. But they're gone. There were just 3 of them. That means it's him, right? Not just some random person vandalising my home. I stared straight at him, terrified beyond anything I'd known for so long. You're safe now. He can't hurt you. Teddy's words rang hollow in my ears as my throat closed up and my compartmentalized life fell apart in a single moment. I knew the truth of my words, but saying it all made it so much more real, and the tears overflowed. And then I was back in Cal's arms, safe against the hard chest he put between me and my nightmare. The prior day hit me like a slap, and I pulled back. Pain etched Cal's face. He searched my eyes, but after a moment, he dropped his hands. Is he chasing me because you're here? You said you'd been hunting him for years, right? Cal scrubbed a hand over his face, and I almost smiled at the familiar gesture. He shrugged, slapping the floorboards with frustration. I jumped a little, and he had the grace to look apologetic. Honestly, I don't know. It could have been some fool that likes your paintings and took them. No, sorry. Not that your paintings are bad. I love them, actually. Guilt crossed his face. Not that I waved away his apologies. It's fine, Cal, honestly. Though that picture of Dolly, I laughed, hiccuping. Don't you bring that hamster into this. Blasted animal never sat still. Seeing Cal made a huge difference to me, like something had been lifted away. It's the sort of weight you don't know you're bearing until it's gone. Then his smile vanished, replaced with a frown. Wait, I forgot to ask you about last night. Have you seen a black sedan hanging around your house? No. The lines in his face relaxed minutely until I shook my head. Maybe. One followed me home 2 days ago. I wasn't really paying attention. I was thinking about, my face heated. Cal raised an eyebrow and I rolled my eyes. Something was odd. I turned around and there was a black car idling just behind me. When I noticed them, it took off, swerved madly around the corner. Not mine, the one you took yesterday when you dropped me home. It wasn't my street, so I didn't think. I thought they were just drunk or something. Cal's eyes were intent on me. This was him in full work mode, and it was a trifle scary. I hoped I'd said it all right. You said them in the car. Did you see more than one person? I closed my eyes, imagining a scene with an artist's eye, looking into the interior of the car, recalling the shadows in the momentary glance over my shoulder, and shook my head. No, the windows were too dark. Cal frowned, then nodded. Even the front one? Okay, what about the number plate? Did you see any of it? I began to shake my head, then closed my eyes and watched the scene play out again. While I'd only glimpsed the front of the car for a moment, the back of the car had been visible for a lot longer. BJ something something X1, I think. Black and white personalised plates. Sorry, I can't see any more. Cal looked surprised but happy. No, that's great. Are you sure? That sort of detail isn't usually easy to pull back on unless there's somebody involved. He cut himself short and I hurried to reassure him. No, I memorise details really easily. Practice from painting scenes and portraits for so long, I guessed. I paused, my gaze narrowing. Wait, were you about to say that you think I'm involved in this? Is that why you lost it at me last night, because you think I work for him? Cal held his hands up, leaning back as I leapt to my feet. Miller, wait, that's not what I meant. I wasn't listening anymore. My mind cast back to our time at lunch, the questions he'd asked, the odd stare from Marcus. Teddy clearly hadn't told him he was my minder, or whatever they called it, my friend. But why not? Cal was his boss, and from what Teddy explained last night, and Cal had taken the same turn yesterday as that black car had. You knew where I lived. The words came out cold. You absolute bastard, you checked up on me. And here I was worried about not trusting you, thinking it would be okay. That I was okay with you when you hadn't trusted me at all. What a bloody fool I am. I laughed, but there was no mirth in it. Cal rose slowly to his feet, hands out. Miller, I'm sorry. I check everyone who has contact with him, contact with Ashley. Cal froze the moment the words were out of his mouth, but there was no way for him to take them back. For a brief moment, I wished I could unhear them, my mind piecing it together automatically. From the same panicked look that crossed his face, he'd come to the same conclusion. If he was here, he knows about me, then he'll know about her. Guilt immediately assuaged me, but I threw it off. I could examine my own ineptitude later. Why hadn't I been more careful? Teddy had gone over the risks with me so many times they were etched into my mind. I reached for my phone, but since I changed, it was probably still in my room. Cal was already on his. Jenny, hi, no, everything's fine. Is Ashley up for a visit this morning? I have some time. Okay, Jenny, listen, she needs to pack just for a while at the very least. Just don't answer the door to anyone else, okay? Wait until I get there. I'll be 20 minutes. He ended the call to Ashley's foster mother and then dialed a new number, one of the boys from his brief greeting. He walked to the far end of the veranda, speaking softly. It was a quick call, and he came back to me abruptly. Get some shoes on, I'll wait in the truck. What? Ashley, you're coming with me to get her, right? I nodded, speechless, then dashed away for my phone and shoes. Miller, he called after me, and I stopped in my tracks, looking back over my shoulder. Pack a bag.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much for the reading and for joining us today. Can you give us a word about what is next for your readers?
My next release is Bachelor and the Geek. I tried writing my first rom-com for the first time, which was really, really fun, until I was told that I couldn't have my dark brooding dude in the sex scene, and he stayed. So it's a semi-rom-com, and it's got a bodyguard, and yep, guess what? It's romantic suspense again. So funny that there's a whole series of those coming. But that one releases on March 29, and my most recent release was Snapdragons and Seductions, which was a Texas Ranger book in a shared world called Wild Blooms, and that released February 16th.
Excellent.
Wow, very exciting. Thank you so much for being our guest today. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Listeners,
You too.
Yes, it's just been it's been very suspenseful. Listeners, you will want to check out the website sofiaaves.com. That's SOFIAAVES.com for more information about the author and her works. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.